Welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here speaking with you all. And so today we're looking at Rocky Balboa as the quintessential humanistic archetype for motivation and overcoming universal obstacles. It's a nice title, but let's break that down. Rocky Balboa is a character that many people, not only in America, certainly America, the United States, but all over the world are familiar with as somewhat of a universal archetype, and we're going to get into that too in a minute. But it's definitely a character that many people are aware of and are familiar with. Humanistic, what does that word mean? That's basically people being responsible for their own lives. Now, yes, there are exceptions in the world of people that are victims of circumstance or victims. That's one thing. But generally speaking, people have innate and inordinate amounts of ability inside themselves to take responsibility for their thoughts, for their behaviors, for their emotional reactions to things. So that's what, when we say humanism or humanistic in the title, that's what I'm referring to. Archetype, there's that word. So archetype, and we're going to get into this in much more depth in a moment, but just even breaking down the title here, archetype is something that is everyone on planet Earth as a human being can understand, relate to, and familiarize themselves with, and motivation. Well, that's a big thing too. You know, motivation is, first of all, it's an emotion. It's an internal process. Now, what might spark motivation can be externally driven, but motivation itself is an emotion. It's not something that somebody can have for us. It's internal. It can only come from inside ourselves, and that is a way of moving in some way, shape, or form. You know, it's how we move, getting ourselves moving, getting ourselves unstuck. And again, how someone does that is based on where they're coming from. And obstacles are simply things in our way. You know, if we've got a goal and we're at point A and we want to be at point B, an obstacle is something that is, you know, in the way of us getting to point B, and that invariably happens. So let's look at that term archetype, okay? From a Jungian perspective, and when I say Jungian, I mean Carl Jung. There are actually five major archetypes. Now, there's other proponents of Jungian psychology that say there's a bunch more, but for our purposes here, I'm going to be stating and illustrating the five core archetypes, main archetypes. So we've got anima, animus, the shadow, the persona, and the self. The anima is the feminine part of our psyche. And I'm not talking, when I say anima and animus being the masculine part of our psyche, but I'm not saying male, female. There's a strong distinction there that needs to be made. When I say anima, I'm saying the feminine. Now, when most people think of feminine, there are certain traits that come to mind that we associate with that. So that could be soft, receptive, open. If we were utilizing it in terms of natural elements, it would be water, because it's so malleable and pliable and adaptable. That's what I mean when I say anima. It's the feminine part of the human psyche. And we will be getting into much more depth with this. I'm just kind of rolling into this here. So bear with me. Animus, if anima is the feminine part of the human psyche, the animus is the masculine part of the human psyche. And certain traits that we might associate or think of when we say animus is hard, warrior. If we were utilizing it as a natural element, we might say fire, okay, because of the innate, different kind of energy that's created in the masculine form, okay? So anima and animus are feminine and masculine parts of the human psyche that we all possess. Next is persona. And persona, the etymological definition of persona is mask, Latin, Old Latin for mask. And what Jung was talking about here was the masks, the proverbial mask that we wear in society. So one extreme example is a person that wears one big, monumentally huge, heavy mask. Sociologically and proverbially, meaning that they never let anyone see who they really are. Nobody really knows who they really are, including that person. That mask that they wear is so incredibly heavy that nobody knows who they are. For various reasons. It depends on the person. It could be fear, guilt, shame, lots of other underlying emotions that lead that person to wear that monumentally huge, heavy mask that the person keeps everyone at a distance. I don't want you to know who I am. Or I don't even like the person that I see in the mirror. So I don't even want to know who I am. The other extreme, that's one extreme. The other extreme to that is the person that wears a million different masks, sometimes a million different masks in a day, because they are trying to, as opposed to keeping everyone at bay and not wanting to get close to anyone, the other person, the other extreme, wants to please everyone. They want to please the old saying, Tom, Dick, and Harry, to accept them. So where they're constantly wearing many masks or many faces to try to fit in. And that's the person that is always saying, okay, am I saying the right thing? Am I wearing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I hanging out with the right kinds of people? On and on and on. Am I in the right career? Am I doing the right thing? So that's the other extreme to that persona is, the masks that we wear with other people because we want their acceptance. Essentially, both of those extremes that I just mentioned is because the person doesn't know who they are. They don't have a good sense of self. And we'll get to the self in a minute. But the persona are the masks that we wear in society. So an example of a healthy, balanced self is someone who, there is this what you see is what you get type of presentation there, that's healthy. What a person says is what they mean. They're dependable, they're reliable, they're loyal. Those are all good qualities. And it's not necessarily just because they want to please someone. These are just good, solid characteristics to have as a person. That we can depend on ourselves, take care of ourselves, and be there for the ones that we love and care about. And being honest and loyal. However, there's certain people that we wouldn't tell certain things to, but we might tell somebody else those particular things, just because of the different levels of trust that we have with people. We're not going to completely divulge certain things to a particular person. We might tell them some things, but then we're going to tell another trusted person other things. And that's a healthy, those are healthy masks to wear. Gives us good balance. for example, let's say someone has 3 really, really good friends. And as adults, we recognize the importance of friendship. I don't want to go too much on a tangent here with friendship, but it's important that we all have friends. And as we get older, it's ideally we have a smaller, closer circle of friends, people that are, it's not about being Mr. or Mrs. Popularity. You know, it's about quality of the friendship, not quantity, how many friends. Anyway, but we have a select few group of friends, and we'll tell, you know, certain things to certain people. Also, growing up in a family dynamic, it's important that, you know, like for example, we might tell our parents certain things because we have to, but there's a lot of times if we have a sibling or siblings, we'll tell the siblings a lot of stuff, but not our parents, and it kind of stays there, you know. So that's an example of a healthy persona, is wearing masks when we need to in certain social situations. It also is worth mentioning, you know, at work or in our career, you know, we'll divulge or we divulge certain things about ourselves, or we show certain things about ourselves, but we might keep our home life separate. So that kind of thing. All right, next is the shadow. And the shadow, a lot of people misinterpret that, or when they hear that word, they think evil, you know, ooh, scary, evil, horrible. It can be that. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not equated to that. Simply stated, the shadow is the part of our psyche that we have not yet acknowledged. It's the part of our psyche that we have refused to acknowledge or are just completely unaware of. It is the true unconscious mind. And, you know, that's what the shadow is all about. Just going to take this off here for a minute, keep me warm. So that's what the shadow is, the part of our psyches that we have not yet acknowledged, we have not yet understood, we haven't looked at it. And it is the true unconscious mind. Think about it this way. In literal terms, in real terms, we cannot have shadow without light. Without light, it's just complete darkness. And without darkness, something is just complete light, which is kind of in the color spectrum, it would just be a washout of white. White is every color, black is the absence of color. So we can't have shadow without light. We have to have that melding of both to be able to have a healthy shadow. So we have to illuminate that part of our psyche. We do have to open up, you know, the hatch and look down there and shed some light on emotions, you know, emotional reactions or emotions that have been deeply harbored from childhood, that have stood there and have never been acknowledged. They're in the shadow. No one's put that light on it yet. Ways of thinking, you know, ways that we think that have been now created into patterns, especially into our adult lives. That's also very important to understand. And behaviors, you know, what we do. And it's usually our emotions and our thought process that drives our behavior. So that's what Jung is talking about when he mentions the shadow. And I do have to just say this real quick. One of my critiques of Jung is that he can be long-winded, so I'm trying to streamline a lot of this stuff and make it really accessible. I love Jung. I'm a proponent of him and his practices and everything else like that, but I think he could have been long-winded in a lot of his writings and a lot of his teaching. So I'm trying to streamline it here for everyone. And finally, with respect to the archetypes, is the self. And the self is a healthy balance and conglomeration of all of those other four. So a healthy balance of when someone needs to be nurturing and kind and compassionate and gentle and understanding, all anima, all feminine archetypes, whether female or man or male, we need to have those, utilize those characteristics when it's appropriate, when it's needed. Animus, we need to be a warrior, and we need to be forge ahead. We need to be ruthless if we have to, brutal, hard. There's times for that. There's definitely times for that. You know, if someone's on a battle zone, a war zone, being kind and gentle and compassionate, it won't fly. Or sometimes in the world, as it were, when we accompany or we're faced with life's challenges and obstacles, not necessarily a war zone, but just life's challenges and obstacles and adversity, sometimes we need to, have that gumption and that warrior mentality. So it's balancing that. It's understanding what masks to wear at the right time. What do we show of ourselves? To who do we show that? Okay? That's the persona. The shadow, we need to really shed light on ourselves. We need to understand ourselves. We need to do the work. Okay? So that's also very, 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 very important in balancing, and which leads to a healthy self. That's what leads us to having a good sense of self, as it were, in the four major Jungian archetypes. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are others. Those were the five main ones, but then we have other ones. Father, mother, child, wise old man, hero, maiden, trickster, things like that. I mean, more specifically, in our father figure, we've got, which would be an animus archetype, okay? It's kind of like a cousin of the animus. Is an authority figure, patriarchal, stern, powerful, all right? The mother archetype, same thing. Anima, connected, nurturing, comforting, compassionate, understanding. The child, now this is an interesting one. It can literally be a child. It can literally be a little kid, a little child. As adults, however, we also have that, this is a cliche, but that inner child. But cliches a lot of the times become cliches for reasons, because there's truth in it. So with the child mentality, we have a longing for innocence, a need for rebirth, for salvation, a sense of wonder, a sense of curiosity, a sense that anything's possible, as is the case with children. The wise old man, or which another way of saying that would be the mentor. So someone who is providing in some way, shape, or form guidance and knowledge and wisdom. And as we see in literature and film, this is where we're getting with the Rocky thing. In literature and film, music, in lyrics or the music itself, there's a lot of overlap with these archetypes. So they can be mutually exclusive, and they are mutually exclusive, but there's other times where there's a lot of overlap, where you can have one character that embodies all of these qualities. And Rocky Balboa is one of those characters, one of many. We're focusing on Rocky, that's the presentation. But Rocky is a character that has all of these qualities inside it. Hero, the hero, the champion, the defender, the rescuer, the warrior, okay? The maiden represents innocence and desire and purity. And the trickster, deceiver, liar, troublemaker, tempter, someone that throws a monkey wrench into things perpetually, okay? So those are just a few of the other archetypes that we deal with. Now it needs to be said that with these archetypes, it is Jungian psychology, comes from a Jungian standpoint, which is the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious, as described by Jung, delves into symbols and images in which humanity is joined together. So that harkens back to what I was mentioning earlier. It's something that everybody on planet Earth can relate to and understand. Emotions are some of the most practical and realistic examples of the collective unconscious. I don't care where somebody is from on planet Earth, okay? You could be from Japan, Australia, North America, South America, Africa, any of the different continents all over the world, different languages. I mean, we all focus on our differences, the obvious differences, like geographical location, language, what is considered normal. That's basically what culture is. The definition of culture is what is deemed normal in any given situation. Religious practices, the way that we dress, the list goes on and on. There's many, many differences, obvious differences that we all have in our lives and amongst our different cultures. However, there is one thing that binds us all together as a human species, and that is our emotions. Okay, I don't care what might trigger an emotion. What might trigger an emotion is cultural. What might trigger an emotion is, comes from different places. What might make somebody sad can be cultural. What might piss somebody off might be cultural. What might make somebody happy may be cultural. The triggers of an emotion can be cultural. That might come from a different place. But the emotion itself is no doubt a unifying element of human experience. So being sad, being joyful, being happy, being full of rage, everybody knows what that feels like. And that right there, my friends, is what the collective unconscious is all about. According to Jung, myth linked humanity to each other, for myth is what is believed by everyone, everywhere, for all time. Joseph Campbell said that. Modern day myths and archetypes, in particular 20th century myths and archetypes, were particularly evident in film. Big time. Okay, we're going to get into this. The Joseph Campbell Foundation said of his encounters in time in Europe, here we go. These encounters would eventually lead him to theorize that all myths are the creative products of the human psyche, that artists are culture's myth makers, and that mythologies are creative manifestations of humankind's universal need to explain psychological, social, cosmological, and spiritual realities. That comes from About Joseph Campbell. Now, anyone familiar with Joseph Campbell knows his work with Jungian archetypes and archetypal psychology and mythology, and more particularly his fusing mythology with film. Film in particular, characters in film, but also literature and other art forms. So it's there, it exists, it is real. There's critics of Jung, there's critics of Freud for that matter. There's critics that say it's all hodgepodge. You can't quantify it. There's many critics that just piss on psychoanalysis, that just piss on all of that because they say it can't be quantified. My defense of that is, do you dream? When you sleep, do you dream? Yes. There's exceptions. People have sleep disorders where they don't go into REM sleep, but that's a whole other thing. But we dream. And the fact that we dream is proof that we have an unconscious mind, period. All right? If you have a disagreement about that, talk to me after the presentation. We can sit down. Okay. One of the most important elements to recognize in the great characters and archetypes throughout history is that there is truth in fiction, meaning that although these are characters, like Rocky Balboa is not a guy that lives in South Philadelphia that you'll see running a restaurant or walking around with his leather coat on or his hat, or actually see fighting, because he doesn't exist. It's a character. The key about it is that it is a character portrayed and played and created and written by a real human being, which in this case is Sylvester Stallone. Here's a brief introduction to Sylvester Stallone as a person. So what he brings to the role. Sylvester Stallone was born as a post-World War II baby in the appropriately named Hell's Kitchen section of Manhattan, New York. Some of his facial nerves were severed from misuse of forceps during his birth, resulting in his droopy face and slurred speech. His family had moved around a great deal while he was a child and had behavioral problems in most of the schools he attended. Stallone attended over a dozen schools after being expelled for disciplinary problems in his childhood. He moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the hometown of Rocky, after his parents divorced, and attended high school there. After moving around a great deal yet again, and after attending college in Switzerland and in Miami, he returned to his birthplace to pursue acting full-time. He was broke, barely getting by for years, sleeping in hostels, bus stations, and selling his dog to keep from going hungry when he saw the 1975 fight between Chuck Wepner, a journeyman, and Muhammad Ali, the champion. The essence of life imitating art. In the fight, Wepner withstood Ali's barrage for 15 full rounds after losing the decision to Ali. Nobody expected Wepner to be able to go the distance with Ali. So that's just a real, very abbreviated biography of Stallone. And Stallone is real. He's a real person. He walks around and he talks, and nobody writes a script for him and all this kind of thing. So he had a rough upbringing of his own, different from Rocky, but chaotic. His parents. It was chaotic with his parents. They were fighting a lot. They didn't get along very well. They separated, like it was mentioned. They divorced, and he had to travel here and there and everywhere. And he had discipline problems in school, probably emotional problems that were not yet dealt with. So he had his own sets of problems. So he brought that to the character of Rocky. And that's my case in point, is that there's real people that create these characters. So in essence, these characters are real. Not in the literal sense that they walk around and everything, but they are created by somebody very real, through very real experiences. So Vogler, he is a researcher, noted that heroes need qualities that the audience can identify with, that are propelled by universal drives, revenge, freedom, to be loved. So we're going to look at now, for the rest of our time, each of the characters in the Rocky films and which archetypes they represent, which ones they match up with. Okay, so for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to streamline this. This is actually written for about a 3-hour workshop, but I'm going to whittle it down to about an hour for the sake of time. So in the character of Rocky, we see a lot of the different archetypes. We see a lot of the things that I was mentioning earlier of the other archetypes. We certainly see the animus archetype. We certainly see a warrior. We see a fighter. We see someone who has courage. Okay? Now, let's look at courage for a minute. Courage is not something that is someone being without fear. That's actually the definition of courage, is being afraid and going through it anyway. And I need to mention right now, it's very important for those in the health and fitness industry to, when you're training someone or you're coaching someone, whether it's in individual sports like boxing or wrestling or anything like that, martial arts, or if it's a team sport like hockey or football or baseball or basketball, you've got to understand these particular things in your players. If you understand, a great coach and a great fitness, someone who's in fitness, they know about psychology. Okay, it is not mutually exclusive. Fitness is psychology. Psychology is fitness. The mind-body connection. The mind-body connection, which is what propels all of us. And so every single great athlete of all time, regardless of sport, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, Babe Ruth, and I don't know what's the other sport? Joe Montana. Okay, so football, baseball, basketball, hockey that I just mentioned. To me, those are the ones that come off the top of my head. Those are the great, some of the greatest players of all time in their respective sport. Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, in boxing, whatever. All of these guys, all of these people, they knew psychology. They knew how to pull from their internal resources. They knew how to understand the human psyche, understand themselves, understand others. So it just needs to be said at this particular point in time that this relates to the mind-body connection, and this relates to coaching. This relates to health and fitness in a big way. Okay. So back to Rocky Balboa. We see this hero, this warrior, this animus quality. That's the obvious thing. But we also see the anima in Rocky. We see the feminine archetype in Rocky. He is not a hard, calloused person. He is a person who has a great heart. We saw in the first film, if you've seen the first film, he is actively working for a loan shark, and he's got to beat people up or worse to get money for the loan shark, and so that he can make a living. And so there's a scene in it where he approaches a guy and he grabs him and he's like, I'm going to break your hands, I'm going to break your thumbs if you don't give me the money. And the guy's really pathetic and really falling on hard times and everything else like that. And Rocky gives him a break. Rocky has gotten to a point in his life where he doesn't want to do that anymore. He's growing, he's evolving. So he's not this person that's completely sadistic and hard of heart. He's a great person. And so we see this mothering, nurturing, comforting side of him. So he possesses that as well. He certainly possesses the child archetype. He has a need for rebirth, and kind of harkening back to what I just said, he needs to learn. He has this innate ability or want to learn, like a lot of children do. Being a sponge, and we see this later on in some of the other films, which I'll get to in a minute. But Rocky certainly has this need for to grow and to kind of be born again in a way. He wants to get out of his very, very horrible neighborhood, which is also a very real neighborhood where those first two films were filmed, and parts of Part 3 and certainly Rocky 5. I've been there. You know, it's exactly what you see. It's not a wonderful place. There's drug dealers all around, pulling out syringes, homeless people barefoot in the cold. You know, it's a very poor, rough, hard neighborhood, and I know a little something about that. But it's a very real place. We see Rocky with the wise old man or the mentor. We see those in the later Rocky films, in the later Rocky installments. We see in Rocky 5, Rocky Balboa, and the Creed films, he's now taken on this mentor role, and he's training fighters and he's training people and taking on the Mickey character, as we saw in the first 3 films and in Rocky 5. But he's taken on that role, so he meets that criteria as well. Additionally, there's an innocence to Rocky. He as like for example, we saw in Rocky 5, where he was taken advantage of by his protege, Tommy, the Tommy Gunn character. He put himself out there a little bit too much and gave a little bit too much of himself. You know, didn't wear the right masks, as it were, with the persona. He didn't wear enough masks. With this Tommy character, he gave so much of himself, and Tommy turns on him. And it did. You know, so Rocky, that's just one example, but Rocky has an innocent, he has this maiden, I know it sounds funny, you know, this hard fighter, but he has this maiden, he meets the maiden quality, the maiden archetype of innocence and purity, you know. And the trickster, I would have to debate that if he actually meets that part of it. I don't think we've seen in any of the Rocky films that Rocky is a bad guy. He's the quintessential, you know, cowboy with the white hat on. He's never, that character, Rocky Balboa, has never been, he's never turned bad or evil. Like Anakin Skywalker turned Darth Vader, this kind of thing. You know, there was never that arc of Rocky. He never went bad. So, other than the trickster person archetype, he kind of meets all the others without question. So that's Rocky. Let's move on to Mickey. Now, Mickey, the Mickey character, is the quintessential mentor. That's the main role. Now, if Rocky's main archetype is the hero, which it is, that, you know, he is the quintessential hero of the piece. Mickey is the quintessential mentor. He embodies many archetypes in one character, such as the anima and animus, through his nurturing and compassion, as well as his leadership and hard-nosed approach to training. We see and are in his character that he eventually comes to not believe in Rocky any longer due to his own limitations and wanting to move on in his own life. He represents the wise old man, the father figure, the hero, and the mother archetype as well. And that's without question. So the Mickey character was really interesting because Mickey from the first 2 films was, well, actually, in the first film and the second film and the third film, Mickey doesn't always have complete and utter faith in Rocky. He doubts his abilities. In the first film, Rocky goes to see him at the gym, and Mickey says, you had the talent to become a good fighter, but instead of that, you became a leg breaker for some cheap second-rate loan shark. It's a waste of life. You know, so he, at that point in their lives, in the characters' lives, Mickey has kind of washed his hands of Rocky. He doesn't really believe in him. But later on, we see that when Rocky gets the title shot, Mickey wants to redeem himself in a way. That character, Mickey, he wants to redeem his own failures in his own life through Rocky, through this hero, in a lot of ways living vicariously through him. So the Mickey character is very interesting because there's a lot of dynamics going on with him as well. So he doesn't always have faith in Rocky. He's a doubting Thomas. But then he turns at different points. In the second film, we see after Rocky had taken the beating that he got from Apollo in the first film, Mickey again says, "Look, you took a beating from the most dangerous man on the planet. He busted your eye open. He's got a bad eye now." And he says, "You've got the heart, but you don't have the tools anymore." So even in the second film, there's parts where he still does not believe in Rocky. Then, through antagonistic behavior by Apollo Creed, Mickey himself gets revitalized and says, "Okay, let's go after this guy." And his faith in Rocky, his faith in the hero, again is restored. And the third film, it's a little different. It's actually reversed. Mickey has inordinate amounts of faith in Rocky. Once he wins the title, but he's keeping him safe, and he's picking fights for him that are fairly easy. And then once the chips are down and Clubber Lang comes in, Mickey just turns tails and runs and doesn't want any part of it, and he's finished with it. And he doesn't think that Rocky stands any chance in hell against Clubber Lang. And unfortunately, he passes away. And that leads into the story. Actually, let's go right into that then. So with the Apollo character, we definitely see the nemesis. We see the trickster. We see the troublemaker in those first two films for Apollo. He's Rocky's opponent in the first two films. And, he fits, that's his main. So we've got Rocky, the quintessential hero. We've got Mickey, the quintessential mentor. We've got Apollo, the quintessential. Now, Apollo's interesting also because he has this arc character. He starts out as the quintessential trickster, but then he morphs over into the quintessential mentor, and friend of Rocky. So Apollo is the quintessential trickster / mentor, because in the first two films, he's his opponent. He does everything he can to humiliate Rocky. Although in a way, in the first film, he gives Rocky a chance. So that was something. I mean, that was a very generous thing to do. When circumstances allotted Apollo, he didn't have anyone to fight him. He had this fight book, this championship fight book, and all the opponents, for one reason or another, couldn't make the fight. Apollo had to kind of come up with this novelty idea and just giving an unknown a shot at the title. And it was supposed to be a joke. It was supposed to just be an exhibition, a show. But Rocky didn't think it was a damn show. He thought it was a damn fight. So Apollo, even in the first film, had kind of a generous way of doing that, of giving an unknown a shot at the title. But in the first film, he had a way of humiliating Rocky and making fun of him. And certainly we see that in the second film. He really was his nemesis. But then by the third film, we see him as the mentor, and we see him as a help to Rocky and getting him through those obstacles against Clubber Lang. So Apollo was the quintessential trickster and the quintessential mentor. Clubber Lang, probably my favorite nemesis of Rocky. The Clubber Lang character embodies Rocky's shadow archetype in the third film, in that he represents Rocky's previous hunger as a young fighter, which Rocky has lost since becoming champion, as well as being a mirror image of Rocky's brawling fighting style and also being another southpaw. Additionally, we see Clubber Lang as being simply too big and too strong for Rocky to try to outpunch, leading to Rocky, with Apollo's assistance, complete change in style to later defeat Clubber. So now Clubber, again, all of these characters are very, very deep and have a lot going on with them. So the Clubber character we see, as opposed to the first two films with Apollo, who were divergent in styles, Rocky style versus Apollo style. If you look at let me say this too, anybody who is a boxer and who learns how to fight, you don't want to watch a Rocky film because it's fake. They're not real fighters. And if you look at any of the fights in a Rocky film, they never protect they never protect their head. They never have their hands up, keep their hand. They block punches with their face and everything like that. So don't look at a Rocky film to actually train how to fight. But we see in the Clubber character another southpaw. So Rocky's a southpaw, meaning he fights left-handed. He leads with his jabs with his right hand. And so is Clubber. And so that's a unique thing that we see in the films that we hadn't seen previous in this third film that we hadn't seen in the first two films. We see another brawler. So if we looked at a real fighter or a pair of real fighters, we would be looking at Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier in respect to Apollo Creed and Rocky. Rocky being Joe Frazier, Apollo Creed being Muhammad Ali in their styles. But now, like I said, Clubber is this Rocky mirror image of Rocky. And Rocky, Clubber's younger, he's bigger, he's stronger, not necessarily tougher, but he's bigger, stronger, he's got the same style, and he fights, they both fight southpaw. So Rocky had to adjust, as heroes often do, to life circumstances. And Clubber certainly is the quintessential trickster. And in an unobvious way, Clubber actually helped Rocky because he was basically, from a fighting style, his mirror image. So he forced Rocky, with Apollo's help, but he forced Rocky to have to change and become an actual boxer and a much, much better fighter. But yeah, Clubber is definitely the quintessential trickster. And he didn't have any overtly other qualities. So he is the quintessential trickster. And yeah, it is, again, worth mentioning that he inadvertently did help Rocky to become a better fighter. He forced him to become a better fighter. Drago. In the fourth installment of the Rocky films, the arms race and tensions with the Soviet Union were at a boiling point, and this film capitalized on this theme. And anyone my age or older will certainly know what I'm talking about and remember that point in time. Resultingly, we see that Ivan Drago character representing governments that are oppressive to its citizens and can be described as patriarchal in the extreme in both communist and fascist regimes. Essentially, Drago embodies death itself in this film, as well as the importance of individuals fighting through those seemingly impossible obstacles that sometimes threaten our own individual freedoms. So, Drago was definitely a larger-than-life. He kind of transcended from an archetypal standpoint. He transcended the bad guy. He was beyond just being a bad guy or a nemesis. He embodied death in this film. And it was the hero battling death, overcoming death. I know that sounds very big, but that's kind of what that character did embody. It was just death in and of itself. So he certainly was a trickster, and in a lot of ways was the shadow as well. Clubber was the shadow too, because he forced Rocky to look at himself as almost a mirror image in what he needed to improve on. But yeah, I mean, the depth of the Drago characters in Rocky IV, the depth of Drago's lack of caring, lack of humanity, if he dies kind of thing. I mean, that's crazy. That's just pure evil and death. So it was Rocky fighting that. So basically, that was death. Ivan Drago represented death in Rocky IV. And it was Rocky, the hero, overcoming, death. Salvation. After Ivan Drago killed Apollo, he, it was Rocky, the hero, kind of avenging that death. Because it wasn't necessary, but it happened. Now, lastly, well, not almost second to lastly, we've got the Tommy Gunn character from Rocky V. It's an interesting dynamic where with the Apollo Creed character, we saw a nemesis and antagonist turn friend. We see the inverse with Tommy, the Tommy character in the fifth film. Tommy initially presents as a student seeking knowledge and advice from a mentor, Rocky. But unfortunately, through some trickster archetypes who pervade Tommy's naivete, he turns on his mentor and loses his way. This is not uncommon for our everyday lives, where we must be true to ourselves and not allow corruption and greed to undermine our better natures. I think that the Tommy character, just like I said with the Apollo character, it was the opposite. Initially in this film, we see Tommy as a friend, as a student, as someone who is like completely. So we see the child archetype also with Tommy, longing for innocence. We see the maiden in the Tommy character, innocence, purity, desire. Will you teach me? He asks Rocky, will you teach me? Will you train me, please? In such a pure-hearted way. And through a lot of the other characters, peripheral characters in that film, they basically turn Tommy against Rocky. So we see he turns into a trickster himself. So we see the trickster in the Tommy character. We see the hero for a brief period of time. We see the maiden. We see the child. All right. So the Tommy character has a lot of different archetypes going on inside of him as well. And of course, we couldn't have all of this testosterone going on with a really strong woman in the Adrian character. We see the Adrian character embodying the feminine archetype in her vulnerability and strength in terms of being aware of her own fears and overcoming them, as well as being a strong, nurturing presence in the relationship with Rocky. Without the presence of the strong anima in balance with the hero animus, he would not have the emotional resources or motivation to continue, because he feels loved and supported, as well as becoming emotionally centered when he loses his way. So, the Adrian character, definitely the mother archetype, also a hero archetype, because she is there for Rocky when Rocky loses faith in himself, when he doesn't think he can do what it takes, or doesn't have what it takes. Certainly a maiden archetype in the first two films. She kind of comes into her own in the later films. Definitely not a trickster or liar or troublemaker. She's void of that. So that's in a nutshell, in a streamlined presentation here, Rocky Balboa as the quintessential humanistic archetype for motivation and overcoming obstacles. And I really hope that everyone enjoyed it and got something from it and learned something. And I wish you all well. Keep fighting. Keep punching.